My name is Harold Bryant. I am 71 years old. I have rough hands from 40 years of working at a lumber yard. I have a bad knee that clicks every time I climb the stairs. I have a small house at the end of Maple Creek Road, with a garden out front that my wife Dorothy used to tend every single morning before she passed. I am not a rich man. I am not a famous man. But 2 days ago, at exactly 4:17 in the morning, my phone rang. And everything I believed for 18 years, everything I mourned, everything I buried inside my chest along with my son, cracked open like old wood in a storm. I almost didn't answer. At my age, a phone call at 4 in the morning usually means one thing: bad news, another funeral, another loss. I have had enough of those to last 10 lifetimes. So I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, letting it ring. But something in my body wouldn't let me ignore it. Something deep, something old. The kind of feeling a father carries in his bones even when he doesn't understand why. I reached over to the nightstand and answered, "Hello." There was a pause, a long one, then a woman's voice. Calm, professional, but with something underneath it, something careful, like she was holding a glass that could shatter any moment. "Is this Harold Bryant, father of Michael James Bryant?" I sat up straight in that bed so fast my knee screamed at me. "Yes," I said. "Yes, this is Harold Bryant. Who is this?" "Mr. Bryant, my name is Dr. Anita Reeves. I'm calling from Mercy General Hospital in Clarksville. I'm very sorry to be calling at this hour, sir, but we have a patient here, and after several days of investigation, we believe he may be your son." The room went cold. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just sat there in the dark in my old house, holding a phone to my ear, while 18 years of grief rose up from the floor like floodwater. "Mr. Bryant, are you still there? My son," I finally whispered, "is dead." Another pause. "Sir," she said gently, "that may not be entirely true. Let me tell you about Michael. Because before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand who my son was, not who people said he was later. Not the rumors, not the whispers at church, or the things his wife said after he was gone. You need to know the real Michael. Michael James Bryant was born on a Tuesday in March. Dorothy was in labor for 19 hours, and I held her hand the entire time. When they finally put that baby in my arms, I looked down at that tiny red face, those little clenched fists, and I made him a promise. "I will protect you," I said quietly. "Whatever it takes, I will always protect you." Michael grew up to be a gentle boy. Quiet, thoughtful. He used to collect rocks, plain, ordinary rocks from the creek behind our house, and he would line them up on his windowsill and name every single one of them. He said rocks had personalities if you paid enough attention. He was that kind of person. He loved music. He played guitar badly but joyfully, always strumming in the evenings on the back porch, while Dorothy and I sat in our chairs and pretended we didn't notice when he hit the wrong notes. He was not perfect. No child is. He had a stubbornness in him that he got from my side of the family. When Michael decided something, that was it. No arguing, no changing his mind. That stubbornness is probably what saved his life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Michael met Vanessa in his mid-20s. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, ambitious in a way that made me a little nervous. But I told myself that was old-fashioned thinking. She had a big smile, and she laughed easily, and Michael was completely, hopelessly in love with her. They got married in the summer. I walked my son down the aisle to the altar because Dorothy insisted on tradition, and I shook Vanessa's father's hand, and I smiled, and I danced at the reception, even though my knee was already bad by then. I wanted to believe it would be a good life for them. I tried very hard to believe that. The first year of their marriage was fine. The second year, things got quieter when Michael called. By the third year, he barely called at all. When I visited, which I started doing less and less because Vanessa made it very clear that unannounced visits were not something she appreciated. Michael would seem smaller somehow, like he was taking up less space in his own home. He had stopped playing guitar. He had stopped talking about the rocks he used to love, the creek, the things we used to share. He laughed less. He apologized constantly for everything, for speaking too loud, for forgetting something at the store, for laughing at a joke Vanessa didn't find funny. Small, constant apologies that broke my heart every time I heard one. I tried to talk to Dorothy about it. She said, "Harold, stay out of it. They're married. It's their life." She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't entirely right either, because a father sees things. And what I saw in my son's eyes during those years was not the eyes of a man building a life. It was the eyes of a man slowly disappearing. I tried once, just once, to say something to Vanessa. Quietly, respectfully, I sat at her kitchen table and I said, "Vanessa, I just want to make sure Michael is okay. He seems a little down lately." She looked at me across that table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and she said, "Harold, Michael is fine. Maybe if you hadn't raised him to be so sensitive, he'd handle adult life better." I sat there and I said nothing. Dorothy had told me not to make trouble. Michael had not asked for my help. I was a guest in their home, so I picked up my coffee cup and I took a sip and I nodded and I said nothing. But inside, something cold settled in my chest. That cold never fully went away. In the winter of 2006, Michael and Vanessa were driving home from a party. There was ice on the road. The car went off the highway. Vanessa walked away with a broken arm and a cut above her eye. The paramedics said Michael was ejected from the vehicle. The car rolled. There was a ravine. They searched for 2 days. On the 3rd day, they found remains at the bottom of that ravine. I will not describe what they found. I will only tell you that the medical examiner, based on the evidence, Michael's wallet, his wedding ring, the fragments they recovered, made a determination. Michael James Bryant, age 34, was declared dead. I remember standing in that medical examiner's office with Dorothy beside me, gripping my hand, and I remember thinking, "This is not real. This cannot be real." But the world kept moving. Paperwork kept coming. Decisions had to be made. We buried an empty casket in March of 2007. Dorothy wept the entire service. I stood beside her with my hand on her back, and I did not cry because I had already cried every single night since they made the call, alone in the dark, so that Dorothy wouldn't have to carry my grief on top of her own. Vanessa wore black and accepted condolences graciously. She moved on faster than I expected. Within a year, she had relocated. New city, new job, new life. She called me exactly twice after the funeral. Then she stopped. "I am going to tell you something that most people don't understand about grief. It doesn't get smaller over time. You just get bigger around it. You build your life around this hole in the center of you, and eventually you learn to walk without falling in. But the hole never closes, it never fills. I lost Dorothy 4 years after Michael, heart failure. The doctor said it was natural causes. I believed him medically, but I also believe, and I will believe this until the day I die, that Dorothy's heart was already broken before it stopped beating. And a broken thing can only work so hard before it gives out. I was alone in that house on Maple Creek Road. My daughter, Carol, visited on holidays. She lived 3 states away with her husband and 2 kids. She was a good daughter. We were close enough, in the way that adult children and their aging parents are close, regular calls, Christmas visits, birthday cards. I tended Dorothy's garden. I fixed things around the house. I went to church on Sundays. I had dinner on Fridays with my neighbor, old Pete Callahan, who had also lost his wife and understood the particular silence of an empty house. I lived a small, quiet life, and I carried Michael with me everywhere. His picture on the mantel, his school, drawings still in the drawer in the study. His first guitar, the cheap one he learned on, hung on the wall of the spare room where I used to let him practice. Every single night before I slept, I said good night to my son. People thought I was eccentric. Carol worried about me. I didn't care. He was my boy, and even in death, he was my boy. 2 nights ago, 4:17 in the morning. After Dr. Reeves told me on the phone that they believed they had my son, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in Dorothy's old chair by the window, and I watched the dark outside, and I talked to her, the way I often do when things get too big for me to hold alone. Dorothy, I said quietly, something is happening. I don't know what it is yet, but something is happening. I was at Mercy General Hospital by 7 in the morning. It is a 3-hour drive from Maple Creek Road to Clarksville. I made it in 2 hours and 40 minutes. My bad knee barely registered. Dr. Reeves met me at the entrance. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with kind eyes and the particular steadiness of someone who had delivered hard news enough times to know how to stand beside a person while the ground shifted under their feet. She walked me to her office first. She sat me down. She told me what she knew. 6 days ago, a man had been brought into the emergency room. Severely malnourished, dehydrated, multiple old injuries, fractures that had healed badly years ago. He had no identification. He was confused, frightened. He refused to give his name for 4 days. When he finally spoke clearly enough to be understood, he told a nurse his name, Michael Bryant. The nurse, God bless her, didn't dismiss it. She looked it up. She found the old missing persons report, the death declaration, the details. And instead of closing the file, she flagged it. Dr. Reeves had called me. I have to prepare you. Doctor, Reeves said, leaning forward across her desk. He is not the same man you remember. He has been through a great deal. He is physically fragile. He is emotionally fragile. And he did not want us to contact anyone at first. He agreed to let us call you only 2 days ago. I looked at this woman and I said, is he my son? She held my gaze. We believe so, yes, but we'd like to confirm with DNA. Is he my son? I said again. She paused. Yes, Mr. Bryant, we believe he is. I pressed both hands flat on her desk and I breathed. Just breathed. Take me to him. I said, I have walked into some hard places in my life. I walked into a hospital room when Dorothy had her first heart episode. I walked into a courtroom once, years ago, when a dispute at the lumber yard got complicated. I walked into a funeral home to identify my son's belongings in the winter of 2006. But I have never, in all my 71 years, walked into a harder place than room 14 at Mercy General Hospital at 7:52 in the morning, 2 days ago. The man in the bed was thin, terribly thin, his cheekbones pressed against his skin. His hair was gray, fully gray and long, longer than Michael had ever worn it. His hands, resting on the blanket, were scarred, but his eyes were Michael's eyes. That particular shade of dark brown with a small fleck of amber near the left iris that I used to tease him about when he was a boy. You've got a star in your eye, son, I used to say. He looked at me from that bed, and he said very quietly, almost a whisper, Dad. I sat down in the chair beside his bed because my legs simply stopped working. I took his scarred hand in both of mine. I didn't cry. I couldn't, not yet. There was too much moving through me all at once for tears. I just said, I'm here. I'm here, son. And Michael James Bryant, my son, who I buried in 2007, who I said good night to every night for 18 years, closed his eyes, and for the first time in what the doctors later told me was almost 2 decades, he slept without restraints, without fear, without one eye open. He slept like a child who had finally come home. It took 3 days for Michael to tell me everything, not in one sitting. He would talk for a while, then stop, then sleep, then wake up and continue. like a man carefully unpacking something very heavy, one piece at a time. I sat beside his bed for all of it. Here is what happened to my son. The accident in 2006 was not entirely an accident. The car had gone off the road. That part was true. The ice was real. But what nobody knew, what Michael had never told anyone because he was ashamed and frightened, and had been told for years that nobody would believe him, was that in the weeks before that accident he had been planning to leave, not just Vanessa. Everything. Michael had been living in a situation that I, his father, had sensed but never fully seen. Behind closed doors, away from family visits and phone calls, his marriage had been something very different from what it appeared. The constant apologies I had witnessed were just the surface. The disappearing I had noticed was just what was visible. He had tried to leave twice before. Both times he had been convinced through fear, through isolation, through the systematic dismantling of his confidence over years, that he had nowhere to go, no one who would believe him, and nothing to return to. When the car went off the road that night, Michael was thrown from the vehicle. That much was true. He landed in the ravine, injured, hypothermic, barely conscious. And lying at the bottom of that ravine, in the dark and the cold, with broken ribs and a shattered wrist and a gash across his forehead, my son made a decision. He did not call for help. He let them search, and when the search ended, when the declaration was made, he disappeared. I knew they'd found something down there. He told me, his voice low and rough. I didn't know exactly what. I was barely conscious, but when I heard the news from a distance months later, I let it stand, because it was the only way out I could see, the only door that nobody would follow me through. He had been living under a different name for 18 years, small towns, seasonal work, keeping to himself. He had been sick, deeply sick, for a long time, the kind of sick that comes from years of having your sense of self taken apart piece by piece. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked him. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. He was quiet for a long time. Then, because I was ashamed, Dad, because I had let it happen, because I thought you'd look at me the way I looked at myself, I leaned forward in that chair. "Michael," I said. I looked for a reason to doubt that death declaration for 2 years. 2 years. I drove to that ravine 4 times. I hired a private investigator once. Did you know that? He found nothing. I went to our priest and told him I couldn't accept it, and he told me I was grieving and that grief does strange things. Michael looked at me. "I never stopped," I said. "Do you hear me? I never stopped being your father, not for 1 day, not for 1 hour. He looked away then, toward the window, and I saw his shoulders shake. I got up from that chair. I sat on the edge of his bed, and I put my arms around my son for the first time in 18 years. Now I have to tell you the part of this story that is harder in a different way. The part about family. I called Carol first, my daughter. She was silent for so long after I told her that I had to say her name twice to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then she started crying, really crying, the kind of crying that sounds like it's coming from somewhere underground. "He's alive, Dad, he's really alive. He's really alive," I said. "I'm coming," she said. "I'm booking a flight right now. Don't go anywhere." That was Carol. Then came the harder calls. Vanessa had remarried. I had known this. 7 years after Michael's death, after Michael's disappearance, I now had to retrain myself to say, she had married a man named Douglas, and they lived in a city about 4 hours away. I had her number from a Christmas card she sent once, years ago, some gesture at staying connected that never really developed into anything. I sat in the hospital hallway and I dialed the number. A man answered. "Is Vanessa available?" I said, "This is Harold Bryant, Michael's father." A pause. Then Vanessa's voice. "Harold, is everything okay?" I told her. Complete silence. Then, "That's not possible." "It's possible," I said, "It's happened. He's alive. He's in Mercy General in Clarksville." Another silence. "Longer. I have a husband," she said finally. "I have a life." I said nothing to that. "I don't know what you expect me to do with this information," she said. Her voice was different now, harder, the careful politeness falling away. "This is a lot to process, Harold. I understand that," I said. "Did he say anything about me? Did he say why?" "He said enough," I said quietly. The line was quiet. "I'm not a villain," she said. "Whatever he told you, I didn't say you were," I said. "I'm simply informing you, as his next of kin of record, that Michael is alive. What you do with that is your decision." I ended the call. I sat in that hallway for a few minutes. Then I went back into room 14 and sat down next to my son. Carol arrived the next morning with her husband, Greg, and their youngest, a 17-year old boy named James, who had never met his uncle Michael because Michael had died before James was old enough to remember. When Carol walked into that room and saw Michael, really saw him, she stopped in the doorway. Michael looked at his sister. Carol had been 28 when he disappeared. She was 46 now. There was gray in her hair and lines around her eyes that weren't there before. "You idiot," she whispered. And then she was across the room and had her arms around him, and she was laughing and crying at the same time, which is its own particular kind of sound, something between joy and grief that doesn't have a proper name. Michael held on to her. "I'm sorry, Carol," he said into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry. You are absolutely grounded," she said, pulling back to look at him, still holding his face in her hands. "You are so grounded. You have no idea." It was the first time Michael laughed. It was a small laugh, rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a long time, but it was his laugh, his exact laugh. And I sat in the corner of that room and I pressed my hand over my mouth and I let the tears come. Finally, after 2 days of holding them back, I let them come. James, who is 17 and tall and looks a bit like Michael did at that age, stood awkwardly in the doorway. He had only ever known his Uncle Michael as a name on a grave, as a photograph on his grandfather's mantle, as a story. Michael looked at the boy over Carol's shoulder. "Is that?" he started. "That's James," Carol said. "Your nephew." Michael looked at James for a long moment. "He has Mom's nose," Michael said softly. Carol burst into fresh tears. "He does," she said. "He really does." 3 days into Michael's recovery, something happened that I had not planned for. His former mother-in-law arrived, Vanessa's mother, a woman named Gloria, who I had met perhaps 6 times in my life at various family events. She was in her late 70s now. She came alone. No Vanessa, no Douglas. She asked to see Michael. I was there when she came in. She stood at the foot of his bed, and she looked at him for a long time, and her face was doing things that faces do when the truth arrives late, and the cost of it becomes visible all at once. "Michael," she said. "Gloria," he said. "I owe you an apology," she said. I knew things about those years, about what was happening in that house. I was her mother, and I chose her. I chose to believe her version. The room was very quiet. "I dismissed you," she said. "Every time you tried to say something, every time your face said something that your words weren't allowed to say, I looked away." Michael didn't respond. "I am not asking for your forgiveness," she said. "I am not sure I deserve it. I just needed you to know that I know." She set something on the nightstand and beside his bed, and she left. When she was gone, Michael looked at what she had put down. It was an old photograph, a photo I had never seen before. Michael and Vanessa at some family gathering, years into their marriage. Michael was smiling in the photograph, but it was a smile I recognized now that I knew what to look for. It was the smile of a man performing. Beside the photograph was a folded piece of paper, a letter. Michael read it slowly. He folded it back up, he put it on the nightstand, and he looked at me. "She documented things," he said. Gloria did. She wrote things down over the years, things she saw, things she heard. She kept a journal. I said nothing. She never showed anyone, he said. She just kept it. I thought about that, about a woman who saw the truth and wrote it in a book she kept private. About what it means to know something and still choose silence. Do you hate her? I asked. Michael thought. No, he said. I don't hate anyone anymore. I spent a long time in a lot of anger, and then I spent a long time in nothing, and now I'm just tired. I just want to eat soup and look at trees and talk to my dad. I put my hand on his arm. Soup we can do, I said. Trees we can definitely do. The garden at home needs some work, but the trees are still there. He looked at me. Home, he said, like he was tasting the word. Home, I confirmed. Whenever you're ready. I want to tell you something about the people who came, and the ones who didn't. Vanessa did not come. She sent a message through her mother. A legal inquiry, mostly. Questions about the implications. Questions about his status. About their marriage, which had eventually been legally dissolved after she had him declared dead. Questions about what he intended to do. Not one question about how he was. Not one word of apology. Not one, I'm glad you're alive. I showed Michael the message on my phone because I thought he had a right to know. He read it, he handed the phone back to me. She was always better at logistics than feelings. He said simply, some of the relatives who had been loud at Michael's funeral, cousins who had made speeches about what a wonderful man he was, an aunt who had wept dramatically and needed to be escorted out. These people now called me asking questions that were really about one thing: the legal and financial implications of a man rising from the dead. Could he reclaim property that had been redistributed? What happened to the life insurance that had been paid out? Was he going to pursue any legal action? I answered these calls briefly and politely. I did not dignify the ugliness underneath them. But I noticed it. My son, who spent 18 years sleeping in cheap motels and field shelters, and once, he told me, an abandoned barn for 3 weeks in January. My son, who had survived something most people could not even imagine surviving, who had rebuilt himself from almost nothing with broken bones and a broken spirit, was now being assessed for his usefulness. People are interesting creatures. They grieve you loudly when you are gone, but when you return, the first question they ask is what it costs them. There was one exception. Old Pete Callahan, my neighbor, who had come with me to the grave every year and placed a small stone on Michael's marker, because he said that was what people did to say, I remember you. Pete drove the 3 hours to Clarksville by himself, without telling me he was coming, and arrived at the hospital on the 4th day with a thermos of homemade soup and a handshake from Michael that turned into a hug that surprised them both. Your dad talked about you every Friday at dinner for 18 years, Pete said, wiping his eye with the back of his hand and pretending he wasn't. I know, Michael said. You were never gone to him, Pete said. Michael looked at me across the hospital room. I just shrugged. I told you, I said. On the 5th day, Michael was strong enough to sit up. They had moved him to a better room. He had color in his face. He was eating real food. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Carol and Greg had gone back to their hotel for the night. James had fallen asleep in the waiting room. It was just Michael and me. The window showed a dark sky with a few stars and the glow of the city. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only exists between people who have known each other long enough to share quiet without filling it. Then Michael said, Are you angry at me, Dad? I thought about it, really thought about it, the way a question like that deserves. No, I said. You should be, he said. I put you through, Michael. He stopped. I am your father, I said. My job is not to be angry at you for surviving the best way you knew how. My job is to be here. That's it. That's the whole job. He was quiet. Mom, he said then, and the word was small and careful, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to use it. When did she? 2011, I said. He closed his eyes. She didn't know you were alive, I said. She went believing you were gone. I'm sorry for that, son. I am genuinely sorry she didn't get this day. She knew. Michael said suddenly. I looked at him. What? I wrote to her. He said. Once, in 2009, I didn't sign the letter. I didn't give a return address, but I wrote to her. I just needed her to know. I needed someone to know. The room was very still. She wrote back, he said, to a P.O. box I'd set up. She wrote back and she said. He paused, collecting himself. She said, whoever you are, wherever you are, be safe. And know that somewhere there is a mother who loves you more than you could possibly understand. And that love doesn't end, not even here, not even now. I could not speak. She knew. Michael said again, she knew it was me. I sat with that. Dorothy sitting in her chair by the window, writing a letter to a P.O. box. Dorothy, who told me to stay out of it, who said it was their life. Dorothy, who had her own way of keeping the door open. She never told me. I said finally, I asked her not to. Michael said, in the letter, I said I wasn't ready. She respected that. A mother's love. A mother who knew her child was alive and kept his secret and kept the door open, and never once, in the years I spent grieving, let me know because she had promised him. She was a better secret keeper than me. I said. Michael almost smiled. She was better at most things, he said. She was, I agreed. Michael was discharged 8 days after I arrived at Mercy General. Carol drove us back to Maple Creek, rode in her rented car. Greg sat up front. James sat between Michael and me in the back seat, telling Michael about school and sports and music with the cheerful consciousness of a 17-year-old who simply accepted the miracle of his uncle's presence as something wonderful and moved right past the strangeness of it. Michael listened to every word. He asked questions, real questions. He was interested. When we turned onto Maple Creek Road, Michael went quiet. He looked out the window. The old house came into view. Dorothy's garden, which I had continued to tend, was bare this time of year, but the structure was there. The raised beds, the stone border, the little wooden marker with her name on it that I had placed there after she passed, in the corner of the garden where she used to like to sit in the evenings. Michael saw it. He didn't say anything. We got out of the car. I unlocked the front door. Michael stood on the porch for a moment before he came in. He looked at everything the way you look at a place you thought you would never see again, slowly, carefully, like he was confirming it was real. He saw Dorothy's chair by the window. He saw his photograph on the mantel, the school photo from 8th grade with the terrible haircut he had always hated. He saw the old guitar on the wall of the spare room. He walked to it slowly. He stood in front of it for a long time. This is still here, he said. Of course it is, I said. He reached out and touched the strings lightly. A soft, discordant sound, out of tune, 18 years unplayed. I'll need to fix it up, he said. We've got time, I said. He turned around and looked at me. And for the first time since that hospital room, since that first dad in a whisper, since all the talking and the silence and the soup and the stars outside the window, my son smiled at me. Not a performing smile, not a frightened smile, his real one, the one I remembered from when he was 8 years old and would run to show me a particularly good rock from the creek. I'm home, he said. You're home, I said. I want to speak to you now, directly. If you have been watching this, if you have been with me through all of this, then I think you already feel what I am about to say. But I am going to say it plainly, because some things need to be said out loud. People will let you down. Not because they are evil. Most of them are not evil. They are just busy and afraid and self-interested. And sometimes the truth is inconvenient, and sometimes love is harder than it looks from the outside. The people who made speeches at my son's funeral, the relatives who called asking about legal implications, The woman who wrote everything in a journal and never showed anyone. The wife who, when told her husband was alive, asked about the paperwork. None of them are monsters. They are just people who made choices when it mattered, and those choices revealed something true about them. Here is what I have learned from these 71 years, and especially from these last 8 days. The people who love you don't love you loudly at funerals. They love you quietly, daily, in small, undramatic ways. Pete Callahan, putting a stone on a grave every year. Dorothy, writing a letter to a P.O. box. Keeping a secret because her son asked her to. Keeping the door open with no guarantee he would ever walk through it. Me, saying good night to a photograph every single night for 18 years. Love is not a performance. It is not a speech at a service, or flowers at a funeral, or dramatic tears at the right moment. Love is, I never stopped. I never closed the door. I never put your guitar away. And here is the other thing. The people in your life who make you small, who teach you to apologize for existing, who clip your wings so slowly you don't notice until you can't fly, those people are not always strangers. Sometimes they are close to you. Sometimes they wear the face of someone you have chosen to trust. If you are living in a house where you feel yourself disappearing, if you recognize something in Michael's story, something in those constant apologies, something in the feeling of taking up and less space, please hear me. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to survive. You are allowed to walk through a door that leads somewhere else. I only wish my son had known that he could have called me. I only wish he had known that the door at 4 Maple Creek Road was never, not once, not for a single day, closed to him. If you are reading this, Michael, and I know you will, I have never been prouder of you than I am right now. Not because you survived, because you came back, because you sat in that hospital bed, and you let someone love you again. That takes more courage than most people will ever understand. To everyone watching, call the people you love today. Not tomorrow, today. Tell them the things you assume they already know, because sometimes people need to hear it out loud. And if someone in your life is disappearing, getting quieter, smaller, more apologetic, more absent, pay attention. A father knows, and a father's door is always open.